Well, President Hassan Rouhani assured the U.S. that Iran would not wage war against any nation yesterday. That includes the United States. And while tensions between the U.S. and Iran continue to rise, some analysts do not anticipate military conflict between the two countries. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Eurasia Group Iran Analyst Henry Rome. Henry, thank you for joining us. You do think
Good morning. Thank you.
Thank you. You do think it's not... The probability is lower that there would be a conflict, but you still put it at, what, 30% or so? But where are we between here and there? Do you think that there is some sort of rapprochement that is coming between the two nations?
Yeah, that's right, Julie. In terms of rapprochement, I think that's very unlikely at this point, at least over the next 6 months. Look, when Prime Minister Shinzo Abe came to Tehran last week, the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei took the opportunity to lecture him about why he doesn't trust Trump and why he just simply won't negotiate with the U.S. government led by President Trump. So I think that reflects the internal Iranian position as well. And so I think negotiations at this point are pretty much off the table. I think we are not necessarily on the verge of war, but there is upward pressure on our 30% probability. Things are not stabilizing, I would say.
All right, Henry, so we're looking at the price of oil today. It's up almost 5%. And now you're saying we're going to have this extended tension for at least the next 6 months, with the Iranians setting a deadline because they're going to surpass their nuclear enrichment allowances by June 27th. So why would the tensions last 6 months? Why wouldn't something give and there might be a confrontation?
Sure. So from the perspective of the nuclear program, our expectation is that the Iranians will violate key terms of the deal, but they will not necessarily break out to try to build a nuclear weapon or even significantly chip away at what's known as breakout time, which is the amount of time required to accumulate enough material for a weapon. So there are a lot of things that Iran can do in the nuclear front that, while they violate the agreement and may raise tension, don't necessarily portend a U.S. or Israeli military strike. And I think the Iranians realize that if they were to kick out inspectors, leave the non-proliferation treaty, leave the nuclear agreement, that would probably trigger a more sharp response from the West.
Henry, what are you seeing in terms of a broader response from the West? When you look at the US's traditional allies, whether it's the UK, the European Union, or Japan, what are you seeing in terms of their potential appetite for stepping up to stand alongside the US in its position now?
Well, frankly, they're very divided. The Europeans are still working very diligently to try to support trade with Iran. They are working against this upcoming deadline set by the Iranians to try to support the economic benefits they were guaranteed under the nuclear agreement. And while the Europeans have said that they will respond if Iran firmly breaks out of the agreement, that does not mean they'll necessarily come on board with what the U.S. is doing, which they fundamentally disagree with. And I think the European perspective, to put it plainly, is that the U.S. is like a bull in a china shop. They had an agreement, the U.S. withdrew from it, and is now doing everything it can to try to upset the regional stability.
Speaking of the regional stability, Henry, I know that Iran is your particular expertise, but I want to ask you about this story that Saudi Arabia is going to push for OPEC cuts, even as those tanker attacks occurred. What is Saudi Arabia's role in all of this, and do you think that those cuts end up happening? How does that affect the region?
Sure. Well, the remarkable thing, and I think just looking back over the past month, is you have 6 tankers attacked, most likely by the Iranians, and basically an infinitesimal blip in the price of oil. In any other circumstance, if demand was not so depressed as it is today, you would think there would be a much more significant price response. I think the Saudis are operating under the assumption that the current demand view of the market will stay consistent, which is that the kind of dour expectations for demand will outweigh these kind of supply disruptions going forward, and that they will support and probably reach an extension of the OPEC Plus agreement.
Okay. Henry Rome, an analyst who specializes in Iran for Eurasia Group, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.